Welcome to video 9.1F, solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. Okay, there's many techniques of solving a quadratic. This is one of them. It's got many useful applications. All right, you can copy this down to your notes, 5 steps. Your notes has 4. You might want to add one more. Okay, I'll go through this step by step. This problem is slightly different than your example. All I did was I changed the signs so we could better learn about step 1. So step 1. If needed, divide each and every term so that the lead coefficient is positive 1. This technique only works in those cases. So for example, if you had a 2x squared, you divide every term by 2. Over here I've got negative 1x squared, so I'm going to divide each term by negative 1 so I get a positive lead coefficient. So divide by neg 1, divide by neg 1, divide by neg 1, divide by negative 1. After I do that, I'll get your example in your book. So you'll get x squared, basically I'm changing the signs, minus 20x plus 32 equals 0. So that was step 1. Step 2, move the constant term to the other side so I only have the x squared and x term. So move all the constant terms over there. So x squared minus 20x plus, I like to put a magic box, equals negative 32. Okay, that was step number 2. Step number 3, the coefficient of the x term, there's 3 magic words, half and square. And I'm going to add that to each side in the magic box and to over there. So here is the coefficient of the x term. I'm going to do half and square. So I'll just show my work over here. So 1/2 times negative 20, and I'm going to square that. All right, 1/2 times negative 20 is negative 10, and negative 10 squared is 100. So 100 is going to be the number that I add over here. And if I get an equation, whatever I add to the left side, I must also add to the right side. I'll erase my work here so you don't get confused. All right, what I've done now is I've forced this to be a perfect square trinomial. That's what completing the square means. All right, so I'm now at step 4. So what I tell my students is I'm going to take the square root of this number, I'm going to take the square root of that number, and I'm going to use that same sign. If that was a plus, I'd have a plus. If it's a minus, I have a minus. So the square root of x squared is x. That sign minus. The square root of 100 is 10. So x minus 10 squared, and then I'll clean that up. That's going to be 68. So that's step 3. Okay? If you FOILed this, you'd get back to this perfect square trinomial. Okay. So now, well, that was actually steps 3 and 4. Step 5. Take the square root of each side, remembering to do plus or minus square root in the right. So what I'll do is I'll take the square root of this side, and I'll do plus or minus the square root of that side. So this square rooting undoes that squaring, and I get x minus 10 equals plus or minus the square root of 68. Now I'm going to solve for x. So I'm in step 5. I'm going to add 10 to each side, plus 10. I always put the plus 10 to the immediate left of the plus or minus. So I will now get x equals 10 plus or minus the square root of 68. And we always want to simplify our radicals. So I'll just make this go over here for now. So I've got x equals 10 plus or minus the square root of 68. 68, I believe I could factor as follows. X equals 10 plus or minus the square root 68 2 by 34. 34 is 2 by 17. So we can say it's 2 times 2 times 17. And then recall from an earlier video, you can take that 2 out. So I now have x equals 10 plus or minus 2 radical 17. And again, I like to write my answers x sub 1 and x sub 2. So x sub 1 equals 10 minus 2 radical 17. And x sub 2 equals 10 plus 2 radical 17. So there you have it, the 5 steps to solve a quadratic equation by completing a square with a worked out example.